early infancy, we work on gaining postural control and grasping. In later infancy, we work on mobility and object manipulation. In childhood, you're gonna work on complex motor behaviors. Adolescence, mature motor skills within extended context. And then maintain motor function without decline. And that's in geriatrics. So, prenatal, this is when they're in utero. You know how these women will get their 3D ultrasound done, and then their baby will be sucking their thumb, or they'll be reaching and grasping and kicking inside. All of those motor capacities are challenging to a baby once they come out, because then they are not suspended in water, right, or amniotic fluid. They are fighting against gravity at that point to complete those tasks. So the motor function may look more delayed when they come out than actually what they were inside. Okay, so this was an assignment for y'all, and I just did it.
Thank you.
Right. So I just thought it was unique to have to do this, so I just did it for you. So this talks about motor development through the process of different ages up to, I think, 12 years old. Yeah. And it goes through prone to supine to sitting to locomotion and then hand control. Okay. Huh? You're welcome. This is a pain in the butt. And it took forever to do, which is annoying.
Yep.
And you don't have enough time for that.
No, we should tell Dr.
I took my time and did it.
Where'd you go?
I've been a student before. I know what it's like. So 0 to 1 months. They should be able to lift their head and turn to the side and prone, okay? They should be able to, in supine, turn their head from side to side and track objects that are 8 to 12 inches away. They prefer their head to one side, okay? Typically that's the right, but sometimes it's not. Why do you think it's only 8 to 12 inches away from them?
Like to see far away.
Yes, but what typically, when you're holding a baby, is 8 to 12 inches away from their face? Your face, right? So that's why, so they can see their mother's face.
This is very triggering right now.
Please, no moms cry.
Not bad.
In sitting, they should hold their head 1 to 2 seconds, and their posture is completely slumped over at this point. Like they don't have those nice erector spinae muscles to hold them up, and so they're just curled over in sitting. It says they make crawling movements at 0 to 1 month, but I have never in my life, so you can take this, because that came from your book, but from practice, that don't happen, not for real. Has jerky arm movements that are not purposeful movements, so that's true, they do have that. 2 to 3 months, they can lift their head to 90 degrees in prone. They can elevate their chest. They can weight bear on their arms and may begin to roll. My child rolled at 2 months old. So, I mean, it can happen. barked and she was rolling. Which is quite crazy to me. That was my first job. My second one, she was a little lazier. She's probably around 3 months, which is still within the range, right? So this is normal motor development. So if you are not meeting these milestones, then you may have a developmental delay, right? This is why your pediatrician gives you, when you go in, they'll give you this whole spiel to fill out about if they're meeting certain milestones or not. It's because they're asking you questions to make sure their motor development is within developmental range to be appropriate. So they'll engage with their hands and their feet at this age. They'll discover their hands and their feet, and they'll play with them in supine. When they're held upright and sitting, their head will bob, and it'll lag when you pull them up to sitting. So when you pull a baby up to sitting, their head is not going to, they're not gonna have the control to pull forward with their head. Their head's just gonna lay back as you pull them up. I should have brought a baby doll. I got 80 of them.
I think I'm a Barbie.
So in locomotion, so while they're in prone, they can pivot on their belly about 30 degrees at this age. So they can turn slightly on their belly. And then with their hands, they can briefly hold a toy that's placed in their hand and bring their hand to their mouth, and they can bat at bright objects and bring hands to midline. When we say bright objects, what honestly, not necessarily bright objects, it needs to be high contrast objects. So that's why you see a lot of, I don't like these like gender neutral toys that they're using now, because they're all like very hushed tones, because the harsh tones is what they need in order to see it. So like good black and white toys. You'll see some that have those little checkers on them, and there's a high contrast in the color. That's gonna allow them to visualize and see the toy much better. And they're gonna bring it to midline, so when they're playing, they're gonna pull it here in front of them, okay? So we know at this point, because we talked about palmar grasp, right? That's not integrated at this point. So what you see is, this is not necessarily a home skill at this point. Until that grasp is integrated around 6 months is when they're going to have more of a honed ability to use that skill. So at 4 to 6 months in prone, they'll be able to push up and extend their arms while they're on their belly, okay? So they're not propping anymore on their elbows as much. They're pushing all the way up into their hands. And also take this as a grain of salt, because some kids don't meet milestones exactly when this says that they do. Like my girls, they ran through milestones that were motor and didn't language, because girls actually tend to develop language more than they do motor. But all in all, boys tend to don't progress as fast as girls do. I don't know why, it just is what it is.
They're so lazy.
So like, when does it get concerned? If like every baby varies, when does it get like, okay, maybe I need to go sit on my baby?
Well, at that point, you're going for, what you should be doing is going to the pediatrician within so many increments of time. And they do that on purpose because they wanna check the milestones then. If there's a concern for a milestone, they'll monitor it. And at the next appointment, if it's still delayed, then they would probably look at more treatment options. Yeah. And then there are kids that are just lazy and they don't wanna walk, or they don't wanna crawl or do the things. And then there are kids that completely skip crawling. They just don't do it.
It's like they go to the doctor and
They
they're like,
spin
yeah, I'm
their
gonna do
leg
that now.
and their leg. They do have y'all ever seen a kid sit and pull with their foot?
Yeah.
I don't wanna get on the floor and do this. But like, instead of crawling, they'll sit on their booty and they'll put their leg back and they'll pull like this to move. Yeah. And they won't crawl. So at 4 to 6 months, they should be able to roll supine to sideline at the very least. And then they should move from being propped to independent sitting. So what's propped sitting for kids? So like, if they're sitting like this, they're sitting propped, okay? A lot of times it's midline, so they'll sit like this. My legs are a lot longer than little kids' legs, but a lot of times theirs are in and their hands are in front of their legs. And that's prop sitting. And they'll move from prop sitting to independent sitting.
I've seen that a lot.
And then they'll pivot and prone completely at that point. They're like little, I don't know, spinners. They'll just spin around on their belly everywhere. And then sometimes they'll wiggle, you know, to try to get where they want to go. Or try to wiggle. They can't quite get it yet, but they're trying.
It's like the legs don't work yet. So they're just
Yeah, they don't have the coordination yet to do the crawling motion. With their hands, they'll retrieve objects within reach. They'll hold the objects. I don't know why I wrote that twice. They'll hold the objects with 2 hands, and they'll bring it to their mouth at that point. So that palmar grasp integrates about 6 months. So you should see this skill hone in a little bit more. Their ability to grasp and release an object instead of grasping and just holding it and not wanting to let it go. Because if you've got that reflex, they're gonna have a hard time getting it out of their hand. But as it integrates, it should be less and less hard for them to remove an object or drop an object out of their hand. Because then you have a 6-month-old with a passy, right? Now they know they can take their passy out of their mouth and it's a fun game at that point. It's like, oh, you want me to be soothed, Mom? Let me take it out and throw it away. So my niece is doing that now. Y'all met her. So she just turned 6 months. So she's taking her passy out and throwing it. And bless her little heart, she can see it, but not quite independently. She's a little lady. Okay. At 7 to 10 months, in prone, they can rock on their hands and knees and move into sitting. So that just looks like this. It's the precursor to crawling. So they just rock back and forth like this, and then they can move into sitting, and then up to all fours, and into sitting. Okay. And supine, they can lift their head as in they can sit up. So y'all, I hate these. I'm sorry for those of you that like it.
It's okay. It just came over and played.
So if if they don't want to be laying down on their back at that point, they can lift their head up off of the bottom, off the table or bed or whatever, and that's good in order to facilitate rolling. And then also facilitate coming to a sitting position from supine. So, at 11 to 12 months, wait, hold on, I didn't finish that. Sitting, they move from sitting to prone or quadruped, and they rotate in sitting to retrieve objects. So, they go from sitting to quadruped like we talked about, or onto their belly, right? Or they can sit and they can turn around and grab an object, okay? With locomotion, they move forward on their belly and they push to their hands and knees and pull to stand. They can briefly stand independently. So, basically what army crawling kind of looks like. And that is actually called crawling. When you are all the way up in quadruped and you are moving in that locomotion in that way, that's called creeping. That's not called crawling. Okay? Crawling is like crawl, like you're wiggling. So, army crawling is on your belly, kind of just crawling like this. Whereas actual creeping is crawling that way. It's just so fun for me.
You could make Miles do it. It is his birthday.
Okay. With their hands, they progress from a radial grasp to inferior lateral pattern here in the bottom of my hand. So instead of here, they move it here. So your power grasp is your ulnar grasp, okay? And in toddlerhood, a lot of times when you see a kid write, they write like this. And it's because they have more control with this side of their hand. So they move from this to that. Okay. At 11 to 12 months, they'll move from prone to standing, okay? I'm not doing that, you know what that is. Supine, we're not making any progress at this point with that. We're just kind of keeping where we're at. Because what do you think has to happen in order to go from supine to sitting? You have to have some pretty good core strength and stability in order to move from supine to sitting right up. And I can promise you, these little bitty babies just don't have that yet. So that takes a lot of exploring and playing in their environment to develop that. Okay. Side sits. So, yeah.
So did you say it was on the grass and then they develop?
No, they have the radial grasp. So think of radial as you can see the R's here, radial grasp, and then you move inferior and lateral. And then you're working to promote that power grasp, which is your ulnar grasp. So side sitting is like leaning from side to side. You can side sit.
Maybe in 99 you at this point?
Huh?
Like, you know how kids like to sit like 90-90 now? Like one leg in front and like cross where my kids sit.
Show me what you're talking about.
Like, they sit with this leg crossed in front and then the other leg crossed this way behind them, and they flip flop.
Oh, yes, like this,
Yeah,
like from side to side.
kinda.
No, the other
Like-
leg more
What are you talking about?
like this.
Yeah, that's true.
This leg back here, like the other one.
Maybe they can go, they got it here.
Like my son, he still sits like this, and so all his toys are here, and then he'll switch,
Okay,
so his legs are like this.
yes.
Will they do that still at that stage?
I would think so, we're talking about 12 months, yeah, they could do that. Walk with one hand held, stand alone and moves from sit to, stand to sit with locomotion. And they begin to use objects as tools. So when they're starting to develop that power grasp, you might see them banging things at that point, right? That's why your grandma gives them a spoon and a pan and they sit and just bang the crap out of it. It's the best toy you can ever give my kids. It's a bunch of pots and spoons. And my second child had no hope. She just stayed on the floor. She got good moving on her belly, if you know. But both of my girls walked at 9 months. So, what?
My kids are lazy.
Yeah, my kids walked, my oldest walked at 9 months and 4 days old. My second walked at about 9 months and 2 weeks-ish old.
Almost didn't walk till over a year.
And then my niece didn't walk until she was about 14 months old. So. But that's the problem when you have a therapist as a mom. I'm just sitting in the floor making them do things that they don't want to do. 13 to 14 months. So they move to standing using half kneeling. You know what that looks like? Remember what tall kneeling is when you're both on both knees, and then half kneeling would be that knee is up and then one knee is down and then you stand up. Okay. Nothing really happening in supine and sit. Locomotion wise, they walk without support. They stoop to retrieve objects, regaining standing. They walk backwards and assist with feeding. They're supposed to be able to use a spoon at 12 months old and a cup. But us moms know we don't like messes, so we give them sippy cups and we still feed them. I did. My OT, I still fed my kids. I still feed my 3-year-old sometimes because she can get in a mess. And she'll even look at me and be like, "Can you help me?" The spaghetti. It's always a mess. In your hand, you can hold 2 cubes in the same hand, grasping with the thumb and the first 2 fingers. They can pat picture books. I want to tear them apart too. 15 to 18 months, they will creep upstairs, and they'll walk upstairs with support. It's so crazy, like you have like these movie memories in your head of your kids doing these things. Locomotion wise, they can carry objects while walking, and they can walk sideways and run immaturely. They may try to run and then just fall over.
Is this the age where they run with their hands behind
I mean, I feel like that's just a behavior for certain people though.
No, I done seen like a lot of you run like that.
With
A
their
lot of
hands.
toddlers just bust out their arms and all that.
Well, they're supposed to be, right,
Yeah, like why does
moving
that
their
even happen?
arms.
Like why do they
Yeah.
just keep them straight back? They don't try to pump or anything. They just
Well, it could be because they have like low tone, right, too. So they're trying to compensate for that. And when you move your posture forward, you have a little bit more balance. Does that make sense?
I just always wonder why little toddlers just bust out.
And it just could be they have low tone, right? I don't think my kids ran very clumsily, but their arms moved very clumsily
I just
with
think
it.
like regular person, they don't. It's just, like my niece did.
Uh-huh.
It's just, but now she run fine. Like she ain't like some folks.
So because my daughter's, she walked so early, my oldest did, she developed some really bad habits in her hips. I don't even know if I have the video anymore. If I do, I can show y'all. But I almost had to get bracing done for her because she wouldn't, she was externally rotated and she would not, she could not keep that foot straight. And then she had some ankle instability on her right side.
Big training this week.
So I had a few people look at her and check her hips and stuff. So the range of motion was not the problem. The problem was that she had weak adductors, right? And internal rotators. So I just literally would sit and hold her leg and she would push me and I would really try in order to like facilitate her foot coming in for walking. And it was just because, I think it was because she walked so soon that she just developed this issue. And she liked her jumper. And so when you sit in a jumper for too long, what happens is those hips are out, right? And you have support in the sling. And so she got used to her hips being in this position. So when she stood upright, she was holding her foot that way. Fun facts. So walking too soon sometimes is not a good thing. Okay, 19 to 22 months. So now we're just looking at locomotion and hand movement. So when they say building blocks like towers and stuff, there is a assessment that has them do that as a developmental progression, is building with these cubes. So that's what it's referring to, is basically it's lining up with what the assessment has them do. A lot of times that assessment is either the Peabody or the BOT, and we'll talk about that later. So at 19 to 22 months, they should be able to stoop and retrieve objects, ascend downstairs with step 2 patterns. Remember what step 2 is? So we've done it with adults too. Okay, at 24 months, they should be able to kick a ball and throw a ball forwards and jump off a low step. At 30 months, one foot leads jumping off the step and they climb on a tricycle. Aside from building cube towers, they imitate circular and horizontal strokes with crayons. That was the first thing that my kids could do. So the first thing you can do is, do y'all need this? No. So the first thing that they can do is this, and then they can do this, and then they can draw a circle. And they're not doing it like this, they're doing it like this. So they're going like this.
Then you just keep going with the circle.
Yeah, they can. But then they're showing you like, look at what I did.
It's a dog.
That's what I do now.
We know. You have the brain capacity of a 20-month-old.
We're getting there, man.
We just have to wore a long enough shirt today.
You know, you're
At
just
3
upset
to
that autism
3.5 years
goes
old, they
over
can propel themselves on a tricycle. They can balance on one foot momentarily, and they can reciprocate arms in running. Here you go, guys. They can reciprocate those arms in running. They're independent with tricycle activities, and they can balance on one foot for about 3 seconds. With their hands, they can unbutton and button buttons. They can attempt to cut something. Their dominant hand is emerging. And then they can string beads.
Okay, I have a trick. Okay, so when you say like, can you change a baby's hand preference? Cause you know like,
Well, they did a years past because they didn't want people to be left-handed, so they would force them to be right-handed.
but like, okay, like I'm like severely left-handed. Like I can't do nothing with my right hand. So like,
They may have just let you go.
yeah,
They
that's
may
what I'm
have
saying. Like, will the baby, like if you try to change to the right, like will the baby just force itself to like do the opposite?
Well, the
or
hand
will it,
dominance
like-
is not gonna be actually really and truly
That's what I'm saying.
integrated
So are you at the
until
point where you can change
they're
it?
about 5 years
Or
old.
are they just like, some are just too late? You see what I'm saying?
I think you would have to hit it very early if you thought someone was gonna be left-handed in order to impact their development.
Okay.
It can be conditioned, but, because I've seen it be conditioned, but it's not necessarily as natural to that person.
So is it true, like, closer to like the 5-year range, that, like, cause I'm left-handed, and in kindergarten, my teachers would try to make me write right-handed. Well, my mom found out about this and she was like, no, like, that creates like developmental issues. I don't know how true that is, but like, all through school, like, my teachers would try to get me to write right-handed, but I just can't do it. But my mom made them stop. Is that like a thing, that it's like developmental issues?
Well, handedness, like I said, like, it's not established until someone is about 5 years old. So they can play with going back and forth between their hands. But you're right, there are some people that are just super dominant to one side. And I could see how that could impact someone's development in the sense that it could delay their ability to progress because they're not able to write information down as quickly as maybe their peers are. So, I could see how that could impact your ability to progress in school. Now, with things becoming so technology driven, that may become less of an issue, and because people are not trying to make people that dominant anymore, or they're not supposed to be. You know, that part of teaching is kind of left field. So hopefully, going forward, like, our kids and the kids beyond that won't have that issue. But everything is set up in the world basically for right-handed people too. So a lot of what OT intervention is facilitating left-handed people being able to write properly as well, because left-handed people take their paper and they turn it all the way around to write.
No, so I write up and down.
Are you? So they'll turn it all the way around. A lot of times their grasp on their pencil will be messed up, and that can impact their handwriting skills. So we'll put them on an inclined surface to help them write more properly or give them drafts to help them hold the pencil the proper way. So there's a lot of OT things that we do for that, the handedness and dominance. At 4 to 4.5 years old, they can hop 2 to 3 times. They can walk on their tippy toes. They can run and swing their arms. They can catch a large ball. They can throw a ball about 8 to 12 inches. And they can, I don't know what that says, but jump. Probably only like once or twice though. It is quite funny to watch my 3-year-old try to
He can't jump. He thinks he's jumping, but he can't jump.
Yeah.
The knees do not bend.
They don't bend.
No.
It's so weird.
I'm like, oh, but
My
he
3-year-old
can't even jump on a trampoline. It's just doesn't
On the
work.
trampoline, it's
He
just that
doesn't
they
jump.
fall over.
Yeah.
They just constantly just, they cannot get
Yeah.
it's hilarious.
So like, I'm not like, I'm not
True white boy.
but anything sports related, I don't know.
Yeah, I've had a lot of that as well. So like, for instance, my sister's right-handed, but gymnastics wise, when she was in gymnastics, she would lead with her left side.
Most left-handed people do it because some coaches don't take the time out to teach you, like right-handed ways. So like, they'll force the players to learn like at an early age because they're right-handed.
Yeah.
There's a lot, like, I have a girl that I coach, she's like severely left-handed when it comes to stuff, but like, coaches didn't take the time to teach her, so she was forced to learn right-handed. But I feel like that's like a brain thing. I feel like it stimulates your brain a lot to try to like force you to learn something on the other side, so.
It does, and I mean, and your brain has the capacity to adapt to that.
So I feel like that's a lot
Is
of
of what?
building.
Why?
Cause you forcing yourself to use the other side of your brain.
I know, but what happened?
Neuroplasticity.
Crossover.
Good answer.
See, look,
Okay, let me finish this and we'll take a break. At 4 to 4.5 years, you can have a tripod grasp with a pencil. You know what a tripod grasp is?
Like hold their fingers.
1, 2, 3. Okay, 3 arms. And you're supposed to have it rest in the web space here. I do not hold my pen this way. This is the best way for you to hold it. You're supposed to hold it this way. I hold it this way. I have 4 points. And my teacher told me that that was a primitive grasp and that it was not appropriate. And I was like, my handwriting is great, so I'm gonna keep it. So you're supposed to have 3 points. So your point here, your thumb, and here on your 3rd digit. And then you're supposed to rest in the crease of your web space as you write.
It's rest in the crease, it's just more control.
Everybody's pre-K.
It's hard, isn't it?
My brother holds his like this.
So much sense. It just runs in the family.
His handwriting is terrible too.
So if somebody holds it like this, what do you think hand muscle wise is not as developed?
Pain eminence?
That can be a part of it, but also think about your intrinsic hand muscles too. Your interosseous. I have to know too. Do you see now why like my brain is occupied by now physical therapy stuff and I literally have to know this stuff too? Okay, at 4 to 4.5 years old, they develop hand preference. And like I said, that's not really hard and fast until they're about 5, okay? They can place small items in a drawer. This is when it's very easy for them to pick up like Cheerios or beads. then they can cut shapes from paper. From 5 to 8, from 5 to 8 years old, they can jump forward and sideways. They can jump over a 6 to 8 inch object. They can skip, gallop, bounce large balls, and I don't know why I keep having jump. Draw, they can draw letter shapes and numbers. They can place small pegs in the pegboard. That's from another test called a 9-hole peg test. They can print well, and they can button small buttons. My child still has a hard time with buttons. My oldest. Right. At 6 to 12 years old, they are mature